They called me the family failure for 15 years. The black sheep who traded a cushy corporate job for a silly little startup. Well, guess what? That startup just bought Lockwood Industries, and I made sure my family found out at their precious annual gala. I still remember the night Dad kicked me out of his study. "You'll come crawling back when this art nonsense fails," he'd said, tossing my 3D design sketches into the fireplace. The embers burned brighter than his faith in me ever had. So I left, not with tears, but with a promise to myself. One day, they'll beg to sit at my table. The first year was hell. Ramen noodles for dinner, a shoebox apartment in Tempe, and a beat-up Civic that barely made it to investor meetings. Meanwhile, Julian, my perfect Ivy League brother, got promoted to VP at Lockwood Industries without lifting a finger. Every family dinner was a masterclass in humiliation. Bella's still experimenting with her little projects. Mom would say, like I was a teenager playing with crayons instead of a CEO building a tech empire in silence. I let them believe it. While they clinked champagne glasses at country clubs, I was quietly acquiring my first patent. By the time Julian was bragging about his big promotion, I'd already sold my third startup for $180 million. But I kept driving that Civic. Let them think I was struggling. The turning point came when Dad's company started sinking. Bad investments, Julian's incompetent leadership, the Lockwood empire was crumbling. That's when the invitation arrived. Annual family gala. Black tie. No exceptions. I almost laughed. They only wanted me there to pity me. I showed up in a custom Valentino dress, the same one Claudia had called tacky last year. The look on her face when she realized it cost more than her Mercedes? Priceless. Dad gave his usual toast about family legacy, then gestured to Julian. Our son just secured a critical merger with Easton Industries. The room erupted in applause. That's when I cleared my throat. Actually, I said, pulling the contract from my clutch, Easton merged with my company last week. And as of this morning, I paused, savoring the way Julian's smile cracked. Lockwood Industries is now a subsidiary of Vanguard Strategies. The silence was deafening. Dad turned white. Julian's wine glass hit the floor. You bought us," he stammered. I sipped my champagne. Hostile takeover, technically. But don't worry, I'll keep you on as a junior analyst. If you can prove you deserve it. Mom started crying. How could you do this to family? I leaned in. Funny, I don't remember family when I was sleeping in my car to fund my first prototype. As I left, I handed Julian my card. HR meets at 8 a.m. Don't be late. The press called it corporate karma. My therapist called it closure. Me, I call it justice. Because in America, you don't inherit power, you take it. And nothing tastes sweeter than success they never saw coming. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting to run. At my company, in my penthouse, with my name on the door. Funny how things work out. I never planned to destroy my family, but when they left me no choice, I made sure to do it with precision. The day I realized Dad was funneling company funds into Julian's failing pet projects, something inside me snapped. All those years of being called the reckless dreamer, while they played Monopoly with our legacy, over. I started small, through Mom's maiden name. She'd always been terrible with paperwork. I quietly acquired the vacant lot next to Lockwood Industries' flagship warehouse, the one Dad had been eyeing for expansion. The seller never questioned the LLC name, Rosewater Holdings. Daniel, my ever-loyal assistant, nearly choked on his coffee when I showed him the deed. You realize this is the parking lot their entire supply chain relies on, right? I smiled. I do now. Next came the downtown high-rise Julian had bragged about securing for Lockwood's new HQ. except the mystery investor who outbid him. That was Cousin Marissa's shell company, the same cousin they'd mocked for her useless real estate license. The beauty of America? Money talks louder than blood. When Dad finally noticed the properties slipping through his fingers, he panicked. I'll never forget the board meeting where he ranted about some Silicon Valley shark stealing his assets. Julian suggested strong-arming the new owners. They had no idea the shark was me. I let them squirm for 6 months, just long enough for Lockwood's stock to dip 30%. Then I made my move. Through 3 layers of holding companies, all legally untraceable to me, I bought their debt. Every penny Dad had borrowed to keep Julian's vanity projects afloat now belonged to me. The night before the shareholder vote, Daniel slid the final folder across my desk. They're finished. Inside, foreclosure notices, signed merger terms, and a single sticky note in his handwriting. Told you they'd regret it. I arrived at Lockwood Tower at dawn, watching the sunrise paint the glass walls gold. 15 years ago, security would have escorted me out. Today, they held the door, because in this country, you don't inherit power. You take it, and I took everything. I always knew Dad's obsession with those gaudy Lancaster Grand hotels would be his undoing. 5-star lobbies with chandeliers that cost more than my first startup seed round, but rooms that hadn't been updated since the Reagan administration. While they were busy impressing octogenarians with overpriced champagne, I saw the future, and it was small, smart, and ruthless. The first Bella Suites location opened in Austin, 3 blocks from where Julian had secured land for Lancaster's new flagship. I remember sitting in my Tesla across the street, watching their construction crew stare at our grand opening. We'd beaten them to market by 6 weeks. Daniel had warned me it was too aggressive. They'll know it's you, he said, flipping through our launch metrics. I sipped my cold brew. Let them. Our secret? We built what millennials actually wanted. No bellhops demanding tips, just app-based check-in. No minibars with $20 Pringles, but locally sourced snack walls with QR code payments. And the beds, oh God, the beds. We spent more on mattresses than Dad spent on his annual Scotch collection. The reviews crushed them. Julian sent his first tantrum email within a month. Who the hell is undercutting us by 40%? I had it framed. By the time we launched in Nashville, where Lancaster had just broken ground, I'd perfected the art of the ambush. We'd identify their target markets through Mom's careless dinner table gossip, then deploy our modular construction teams. 16 weeks from empty lot to grand opening, a timeline that made traditional developers like Dad physically ill. The Denver opening was my masterpiece. I booked their intended celebrity chef for our rooftop bar instead. When Dad's team arrived to scout locations, they found our neon sign glowing right across from their proposed site and our occupancy rates at 98%. Aunt Marcella cornered me at Thanksgiving. These Bella places, they're yours, aren't they? Her salmon-colored lipstick quivered. I passed her the cranberry sauce. Wouldn't you rather stay somewhere with good Wi-Fi? The final stroke came when Forbes listed Bella Suites as the Airbnb killer the same week Lancaster announced their 3rd quarterly loss. I wore the magazine cover printed on a silk scarf to Dad's birthday brunch. Julian looked like he might stroke out. This is war. I adjusted my scarf. No, little brother. War implies you stand a chance. By year's end, we'd opened in 12 of Lancaster's 15 target cities. Their investors started jumping ship, their stock plummeted. And that vanity project in Miami? We bought the half-finished carcass for pennies on the dollar. The morning they announced restructuring, I treated myself to pancakes at the original Austin location. From my window seat, I watched a Lancaster executive check-in with 2 suitcases and a resignation letter. Daniel slid into the booth with our latest numbers. They're calling it corporate homicide. I drizzled syrup in the shape of a dollar sign. In America, we call it competition. And honey, I play to win. I knew we'd reached the tipping point when Margaret Lancaster herself showed up at my office unannounced. The queen bee of the hospitality industry, who once told the Wall Street Journal that boutique hotels were a passing fad, now stood in my lobby wearing what I can only describe as panic disguised in a Chanel suit. Daniel buzzed me, barely containing his glee. "You're not going to believe who's here to discuss mutual opportunities." Should I make her wait? I let her sweat for 27 minutes. Exactly how long I'd waited outside Dad's office the day he refused to fund my first business plan. When I finally opened the door, Margaret looked like she'd aged a decade since their last earnings call. The Lancaster stock had dropped 45% since we'd begun our expansion. Their investors were screaming for blood. "Bella," she began, that saccharine society smile plastered across her face. "How innovative you've become." I gestured to the chair across from my standing desk. "Funny how necessity breeds innovation when someone's trying to put you out of business." She flinched. I savored it. The negotiation was pathetic. Margaret offered me 20% above market value for our Austin and Nashville properties. When I laughed, she upped it to 50%. When I still didn't blink, she slid a folder across the table with their latest Hail Mary, a merger proposal that would make me a very rich young woman. I opened it to find my own face staring back at me from a Forbes cover taped inside. The headline, "The 34-year-old disrupting hospitality's old guard." Someone had circled my net worth estimate in red pen. "Your board," I said, tapping the photo, "still doesn't understand why they're losing. This isn't about money." Margaret's mask slipped. "Then what do you want?" I leaned forward. "Remember the Hamptons charity gala 2 years ago? When you told Dad I'd flamed out after business school?" Her knuckles went white around her Birkin. "I want you to watch everything you build crumble because you underestimated me." The email came 3 days later, an offer so obscenely overpriced it would have made Warren Buffett blush. Daniel actually gasped when he saw the number. I hit delete. The next morning, Lancaster announced they were abandoning 5 markets entirely. That afternoon, I bought their Denver development site out of bankruptcy court. And when Margaret finally resigned, I sent her a fruit basket with a note, "Wishing you a relaxing retirement. P.S. The mangoes are from our Costa Rica location, where you plan to build next." Dad called it vindictive. I call it capitalism. Because in America, when someone tries to bury you, you don't just climb out of the grave. You build a goddamn skyscraper on top of it. I wore white to their shareholder meeting. Not a metaphor, just good business. White shows every stain, and I wanted Margaret to see exactly when the blood drained from her face. The Lancaster Grand Conference room smelled like old money and desperation. Margaret held court at the head of the mahogany table, still playing CEO despite the whispers about her impending ouster. When I slipped into the back row, her assistant actually dropped a stack of folders. "Bella," Margaret purred, that society hostess charm cracking at the edges. "How unexpected." I smiled, crossing my legs slowly. Wouldn't miss it for the world. The meeting droned on profit warnings, restructuring plans, empty promises about legacy values. Then came the vote on new board members. When the CFO read the tally, Margaret's fountain pen froze midair. "That can't be right." The room went still as the lawyer repeated it. "Romano Hospitality Group controls 40.2% of voting shares." Margaret's head snapped toward me. I watched the realization hit like a freight train. The offshore funds, the silent partners, All those mystery investors who'd been buying Lancaster's plummeting stock. Me. You, she breathed. I stood, smoothing my dress. Funny how quickly institutional investors jump ship when a 28-year-old starts beating you at your own game. The room erupted. Margaret started screaming about proxy fights. One of the old money board members actually clutched his chest. Through the chaos, I locked eyes with Dad in the second row. His expression was priceless, equal parts horror and something dangerously close to pride. Margaret lunged across the table. "You'll never get control." I opened my clutch and slid a single sheet of paper down the polished wood. "Actually, with the convertible notes from your Miami disaster?" The document stopped inches from her manicure. "I'm at 51% as of this morning." The silence that followed was sweeter than any boardroom victory, until Ms. Romano, the general counsel, cleared his throat. "As majority shareholder, would you like to restructure the agenda?" I glanced at my watch. "Let's start with firing the entire C-suite." Margaret's chair hit the wall as she stormed out. I didn't watch her go. Too busy texting Daniel one word: packaged. Because in American business, there are two types of people: those who follow the rules and those who rewrite them. Guess which one I am. I let Margaret sweat for 3 days before summoning her to my penthouse. When she arrived, her usual Chanel armor was replaced by a simple black suit, the uniform of surrender. "You can keep your CEO title," I said, pouring 2 fingers of the scotch Dad used to reserve for important guests. I slid the glass across the marble counter. "But you'll report to my board. And we're rebranding to Lancaster Romano." Her hand shook so badly the ice cubes clinked. That name has stood for excellence for 60 years. So did Blockbuster. I tapped the contract. "Sign or watch your life's work get liquidated by private equity." The pen scratched like a death rattle. Daniel appeared with champagne as her car pulled away. "You're being shockingly merciful." I smirked. "Keeping her on is mercy? I just made Margaret Lancaster my employee." The bubbles burned going down. "Besides, true power isn't in destroying dynasties. It's in remaking them in your image." The next morning, I announced the Daniel Alvarez Scholarship. Full rides for immigrant women studying hospitality management. The press ate it up, especially when I revealed the funding came from liquidating Margaret's corporate jet. Dad visited unannounced that night, his first time in my home. He stared at the city lights through floor-to-ceiling windows, his reflection fractured in the glass. "You played the long game," he said finally. "I learned from the best." I handed him the tumbler he'd always favored. "Funny, isn't it? You spent 30 years building an empire for Julian, but it's your reckless daughter who actually preserved it." His silence was admission enough. At the rebranding gala, Margaret stood stiffly beside the new Lancaster Romano logo, her smile as genuine as a $3 bill. When CNN asked why I spared her, I adjusted the diamond Daniel had insisted I wear. Every good hotelier knows. Sometimes the old architecture is worth saving, just needs remodeling. The cameras loved it. Margaret looked ready to choke on her canapes. Later, as I walked through the lobby we'd redesigned with interactive digital art and a juice bar where the cigar lounge used to be, Julian materialized beside me. "You won," he muttered. I straightened his tie, the same Burberry pattern Dad had worn for decades. "No, little brother, I upgraded." The final touch came at midnight. Alone in my office, I hung one new piece of art, the original Lancaster Grand Blueprints, framed with my first sketch of Bella Suites laid transparently over them. The perfect overlay of past and future. Daniel found me there, tracing the lines of what I'd built. "They'll never admit you saved them." I turned off the lights. "They don't have to. The balance sheets do. Because in the end, the joke was on them. They called me an outsider, a disruptor, a threat. But I was the only one who ever truly loved this business enough to drag it kicking and screaming into the 21st century. And darling, that's not revenge. That's legacy.